Coming up, the New York Football Giants continue their coaching search. Mel Kiper provides some potentially upsetting information about the draft, and we take a look at what could be the most biggest playoff bracket among the OGP hosts in podcast history. We dive in next. Yes, my friends, it is OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Arbrecht, over there, Andrew Makowitz. It'd be a farce to say that we're both healthy, wealthy, and wise, but nobody cares about that, Andrew. We forge ahead talking about where the New York Football Giants stand in their coaching hire, still a lot of positions of need, and we are firmly pushing past whatever the narrative was around Brian Daboll and Wink Martindale. That is no longer a part of this podcast's ledger. We now talk about where they're going moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that we've closed the book on the Wink Martindale era as the defensive coordinator of the Giants. Like,
I heard they're going to
obviously,
interview him for the DC job.
yeah, he's interviewing. Imagine they brought him back to interview. They're like, yeah, let's just see if we can mend fences. But it's Wink Martindale, I believe, is interviewing for the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive coordinator position. I think that's a match made in heaven. I think that he's going to go down there and probably do pretty well, just like he did for the Giants.
Right.
So I think it's easy to close the book. We listened to some of the pot shots that came from the Brian Daboll New York Giants organization, initially saying how crazy they were. Then you had the Wink Martindale and Drew Wilkins piece that came out that basically said everything is toxic. Don't come here. Whatever you do, don't do it. I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle. But now the Giants are forging ahead, just like we all should. And they're interviewing different people for the defensive coordinator position. But it doesn't seem like there's too much urgency around it right now, right, Adam?
No, and the one thing to take away from everything that went on here with the past coaching situation is that internally it seems like Brian Daboll has the confidence, obviously from Joe Shane, who brought him in when he was hired as the GM, but all the way up the chain of command. Like, it looks like this is being viewed as, wow, that was a wild situation that just happened. Okay, let's go ahead and reset ourselves here and be ready to move forward into year number 3. And when it comes to the defensive coordinator spot, as you mentioned, it's funny. They hired an offensive line coach very quickly, heading into this offseason. But when it comes to the defensive coordinator spot, we're going to get a laundry list of players, right? Jerome Henderson, internal candidate. I said players, but I meant coaches. Anthony Campanale, which I was almost going to mess up, but definitely got through fine. Derek Ainsley is also out there. Chargers Shane Bowen. We've got the Titans Denard Wilson. So there's a lot of different coaches being thrown out here, and I think I labeled a couple of them from the wrong teams with where they're coming from. DB coach for the Ravens is Denard Wilson. Do you feel like this is a patience because, hey, we came out of 2 years again? Wink Martindale, the defense was productive at times. They struggled in certain areas, but we don't want to walk down a road at a coaching position that is primarily going to be you take care of that side of the ball. So, but we don't want to have something go down where Brian Daboll looks over and goes, well, I'm not really a big fan of what this guy's doing over there.
Well, so Adam, I think it's a little bit more simplistic than that. I think two things are happening. One, the Giants are looking and casting a wide net for different candidates. So obviously, you see internal people like Jerome Henderson getting his opportunity, which is great. He's had some great success with some of the defensive backs before. Anthony Camignale of the Dolphins, if you watch any Hard Knocks, he's like a larger than life kind of guy. Don Bosco prep type guy, New Jersey guy through and through, would be another character in the building. But listen, I think Denard Wilson is a really interesting one, defensive back coach from the Ravens. Seems like the Ravens scheme was brought to the New York Giants with Wink Martindale. He would keep some consistency schematically, which I think could be important. But Adam, I think the elephant in the room is this. There are still coaches who are going for head coaching positions that, if they don't get them, could fall into a coordinator position for the Giants.
Interesting.
A la someone like, I don't know, Leslie Frazier right now, who worked with Brian Daboll, who worked with Joe Shane, who is trying to see if he can get another head coaching gig. But wouldn't a nice cushy landing for him be the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants, having familiarity with half of the organization already?
If you're talking about stability, right, for the Giants and familiarity with Brian Daboll, of course, right? And I think, I'd be fine if they hired Leslie Frazier. I mean, we all probably have to just acknowledge that when coordinators get hired, when head coaches get hired, unless it's a guy that has a long track record and you feel like you're leaning on something, unless Bill Belichick is walking in the door, you say, hey, yeah, we're optimistic. Let's see how they develop and grow. Likewise for coordinators, Leslie Frazier, you could kind of know what you have in him. Obviously, he has the track record. But when you look at these other candidates, I don't know if someone isn't worthy, right? If a DB coach from another team isn't worthy of that elevated chance. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I prefer they go with a younger or they go with someone with their first DC chance versus bringing in stability. I just hope that their decision making process is based on that. Who's our best opportunity for this defense to really grow and expand over the next handful of seasons? And Leslie Frazier could represent another DC stop and then maybe onto a head coaching opportunity in short order.
You know what's interesting? We always think like, oh, get the young, unproven, up and coming guy because he's going to be around for a while, right? If we get one of these veterans that does really well, he's going to be off to his next head coaching position,
Sure.
right? And then you look at, I don't know, Mike Kafka, who spent 1 year with the Giants and had 3 head coaching interviews after 1 season. Look at Mike Kafka again. Even after a poor year, Mike Kafka gets multiple head coaching interviews. And he
Yeah.
was a guy that you're like, oh, could he be around long term? He could have bolted last year if he got offered the job. Look no further than the Houston Texans, who had success with Bobby Slowick as their offensive coordinator. Comes from the San Francisco tree. He had a tremendous year with CJ Stroud, made the playoffs, won a playoff game. He's being talked about as one of the front runners for the commander's position. When they hired him, I'm sure D'Amico Ryans was like, hey, we're going to get 3 years out of this guy, so we're going to have some
Right.
consistency. The problem is, in the NFL, if you get really good coordinators and they perform really well, they're going to leave. And those are good problems to have to solve. You don't want the other one where it's like, should we let him go? Should he stay? Does he want to stay? Like, no, you want to promote from within, let them go take their head coaching position because you never know what's going to happen in the future.
Well, the one thing I will say in that regard is when we think about, multiple coaches being fired on the defensive side, Wink Martindale leaving, is that whatever you are resetting to here, and now this could come underneath Leslie Frazier, right? It could come from the Giants organization and liking these coaches, Brian Dable, on any aspect of it, offensively or defensively, is also trying to get back to the spot, to your point of, and this is maybe why like Henderson getting an interview, that intrigues me, because the idea is, well, we have a pipeline. Our pipeline is where the coaches come from. So as a guy elevates from an offensive or defensive coordinator spot and gets a head coaching job, we say, yep. And then we move up our chain of command. We don't feel like we need to keep going outside. We need to keep battling other teams that are looking for these positions of value. We know some of the stronger coaching trees throughout the NFL. We see a lot of those teams making it to the playoffs, right? So I do think that the Giants would be well suited to look at the process in that vein. How do we cultivate building and growing coaches for ourselves? Whether they go on to be successful elsewhere, hey, that happens. But let's not put ourselves in a position where we're constantly going outside, needing to bring in guys. And this offseason, obviously, has been a little bit more tumultuous than others. The other thing that we can mention here, too, when we talk about coaching, I want to get to Mike Kafka, but just quickly, we know that the Giants not only brought back Aaron Wellman, an executive director of player performance. He was at Indiana. He'll be handling the strength and conditioning. This was reported by Jordan Renan first over on Twitter, probably from other outlets as well, but that's where I saw it first. Also added Joel Thomas as the running backs coach. He had the same role with the Saints. Now, on the strength and conditioning, I like that. We always talk about the Giants just seem to have injury problems no matter what. So let's try to get back to maybe someone who can elevate that. When we talk about the running back, I have a hard time sometimes looking at coaches because when you read write-ups on Thomas, and I'm not knocking him in any way, shape, or form, it's just funny that when you read up about him, he's like, and he went ahead and took Alvin Kamara and turned him into, and they list off the stats. Now, do I think that a coach plays a critical role? Obviously, but it'd be like saying, and then he took Adrian Peterson and turned him into a Hall of Famer. Like at some point, it is just the talent that you end up working with that really matters. That being said, I'd rather have a coach coming from a situation where the running game has had tremendous success, where after Drew Brees, they were able to lean on the running game for big stretches and still be successful. So I like the hire. I'm curious about the value that he brings, not just to Saquon if he returns, but also to Eric Gray, also to other young players, Corbin, if they end up giving him a shot this upcoming season.
I understand what you're saying, where it's like, anytime a player performs very, very well in the field, immediately the coach also gets credit for
Right.
unlocking whatever it is that that player had talent wise in them. But the nice thing about it is, listen, when you talk about the facts, since Thomas has been the running back coach, no team in the NFL has scored more rushing touchdowns than the New Orleans Saints. So if
Yep.
you're going to start somewhere, that seems like a pretty good place to start. Then also you have guys like Mark Ingram who played there for many years, came back, left, came back, has been, someone that's been around, said he is the best coach that he has ever had in his career. And so, like, the production's there. Then you also have the anecdotal, like, everyone likes working with this guy. So when you think about a hire, like, you can't be more prepared than the guy that showed the production on the field and also created the personal relationships. To me, that's a home run, especially if Saquon's going to be back.
100%, right? Well liked and respected by players, and then a track record. So there's no knocking this here. Hopefully it works out. The Giants are obviously also looking at special teams, trying to fill that role as well, and we'll continue to keep an eye on that. Before we get into the Mike Kafka of it all, which I do think is getting pretty intriguing here as the offseason continues to unfold, we remind you that our friends over at Personam are going to improve your vision into your network security environment and allow you to see cyber threats that other tools and platforms just can't. Personam is always vigilant, always learning. Now, when we think about Mike Kafka and the offensive coordinator spot, and we say it's been a rough couple of years for the offense, how possibly could Mike Kafka be a hot candidate out there on the market? You mentioned before he was requested by Seattle, he was requested by Tennessee. Now he got a head coaching gig, Andy. It's just not necessarily going to be at the NFL level just yet.
It is not. So Mike Kafka was announced as the head coach of the West roster of the East West Shrine Bowl.
Let him cook.
And you may say, oh, that's interesting. Like, what does that mean? It's basically, another showcase for some of the college players to be able to get out there and show NFL scouts before the combine and everything else what they've got. Do you put any credence into Kafka getting offered to be able to coach the West team? Like, is that where your mind goes first, Adam?
I listen, whether or not I think this is, a massive accolade, what it is an opportunity for whether it's going to be for the Giants or for another team to put on display. What does it look like when I am fully at the helm? I made the tongue in cheek joke, but who makes the play calls? Obviously, you'll have to look at his coordinators for that. And a couple of Giants are being brought along with him to that staff. I think this is an elevator for him. He's had multiple head coaching interviews, so he's still well regarded as far as being a candidate. If he goes to this game and maybe showcases when you have a good offensive line play, when you have some weapons, right? When you have a solid quarterback, if he shows that he can be that guy, we've seen Bill Belichick interview with Atlanta. We think that they're going for high profile. They've got a lot of weapons. Like they have a lot of things in place. It's not hard for me to look and have one of those teams. The Chargers maybe want a little more veteran and security there, right? I think they may go like a Harbaugh kind of route, but there'll be plenty of teams that'll look at Kafka and say, love what I saw there. Already liked you, by the way. This isn't the only thing we're judging you on, but that was a nice little, I don't know, resume builder. Let's just say a nice little feather in your cap. So I think it can move the needle for him. I guess it could also go the other way if it looks like a total travesty, but I would find it hard to think that Kafka takes this opportunity, if not feeling pretty bullish that he can put a good display on tape.
So I have a different thought about this,
Okay.
and it's more in relation to the Giants. So we know that
He
there's a
wants to
little.
claim he wants his play calling back. He wants to make the play calls here. Let's go.
No, 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 no,
Oh,
no. I'm not gonna go that route. They can figure that out. Dave's and Joe Shane and Mike Kafka can figure that out.
okay.
Right, he's obviously interviewing for head coaching positions. People have mentioned he may make a lateral move if they mutually agree to part ways, the Giants
Mhm.
and Mike Kafka, because he wants another opportunity. But he is under contract. We haven't heard him say anything otherwise. If Mike Kafka is back, this is an interesting situation because your offensive coordinator will be standing, coaching for weeks and weeks, some of the potential prospects that are coming out of this draft. And if you need like a hands on approach, how does Michael Penix handle something? How does this particular quarterback or this particular wide receiver, how do they deal with adversity? How do they deal with coaching? I actually think it gives you a little bit of a leg up being able to coach them the way that you coach them in your organization and
Sure.
be like, does this guy take to it? Does he not? Does he learn very well? Can he process things quickly? Like to me, it only benefits getting more information for the Giants organization for Kafka to go to Daboll and Shane and say, I know you like this guy, but I tried to work with him and it's very, very difficult. He's not picking it up as quickly as you want. Any insight that other teams may not be able to get, like, seems helpful to me at least.
No, I love that actually. That's probably the most important thing, right? Because What happens with Mike Kafka for the Giants or somewhere else? Well, that's going to unfold the way that it is. If we look at it from Mike Kafka is currently on the Giants staff, and we assume that he will be on the Giants staff this year, then why don't we just get more information, right? I think that's probably the best thing that you can take out of this opportunity for Kafka coming up. And incidentally, when we think about that draft that is coming up, a funny little thing happened on the way to the offseason. Mel Kiper came out and said, "Hey guys, guess what? I've got some thoughts about the draft." He was talking with Dane Brugler, and Mel Kiper both came to the same conclusion right now in their mock draft about the number 6 overall pick for the New York Football Giants. Now, they have this going in order of Caleb Williams to Chicago, Drake May to the Commanders, Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Patriots, Neighbors goes to Arizona, and the Chargers take Brock Bowers. That seemed interesting to me. Now, the flip side of this would be for Kiper. That was Brugler with his top 5. Then it goes Williams, Daniels at 2 to Washington, May to New England, which I think makes more sense to me. Like quarterbacks going top here really makes sense. Harrison Jr. to Arizona, and then Neighbors going to the Chargers. At which point you get to the Giants, and they both agree. No Marvin Harrison Jr., no Malik Neighbors. Why not Rome Odunze, the Washington product, who I thought obviously put on a good display at the championship game despite the loss? Are you surprised this early in the offseason, 2 pundits looking at the draft, seeing the top 2 wide receivers go off the board, the top 3 quarterbacks go off the board? Obviously, the Giants didn't make a move in this scenario, and they end up going with like the 3rd best wide receiver, maybe over an offensive lineman, maybe over edge rusher, maybe over trading, any of these things, right? How confident are you if that ends up being the play for the Giants?
Well, considering I've been on the Rome Odunze train for a while and saying like I like him a lot. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. is grading out as the best prospect.
Yep.
But as the Giants sat here at 5 or 6, I said I would not mind having Rome as the wide receiver that we move forward with. Just watching his production, watching his skill, watching his route running, I like everything that I see. And here's a simple thing, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about the draft, because we're talking about, well, he's the 3rd best wide receiver coming off the board. Like, do you really want like whatever's left over when you're thinking about like transforming your organization? Just look at the 2018 NFL draft. Baker Mayfield went number 1. Sam Darnold went number 3. You know who the consolation prize was for the Buffalo Bills, the 3rd quarterback off the board? It was Josh Allen, right? So like just
Okay.
saying, just the fact that someone else likes a different trait or is looking for a different characteristic doesn't necessarily mean that that player can't thrive in your organization or your system. So
Sure.
for me, I don't really care if he's the 3rd or the 5th or the whatever. Like if you recognize the type of routes you want to run, the scheme you want to run on offense, and this guy matches up with it, plus all the other things that you're looking for, like I'm totally fine with taking Romo Dunze, even if he is the 3rd wide receiver off the board.
And while we're talking about taking it 6th overall, and the Giants have picked high in the draft, obviously in recent years, another nugget to this is go back to the draft prior in 2023. Now, by the way, going off of draft buzz here, this will feel really good for the New York Football Giants fan base. The top wide receiver in that draft class was Quentin Johnson. He went to the Chargers. Now he's had some drop issues. Smith and Jigba went to the Seattle Seahawks. Jalen Hyatt was the 3rd ranked in terms of rated players on NFL Draft Buzz at the wide receiver position. He was an 88.7. He was taken in the 3rd round. Now, the point being here, it's 89.5, 89.4, 88.7. Those are your top 3 from 2023. 94.2 is Marvin Harrison Jr. A 92.0 is Malik Neighbors. And then Odunze is an 89.7 currently rated. That's better than any of the players you were taking the year prior. So to your point about not every draft class is created equal, the value at different positions is not created equal either. I might now again, we'll get into the nooks and crannies this as the summer moves on. As you get to that point, if we're talking about taking weapons, I've already mentioned this once. There is a athlete playing at the tight end position that has the type of impact potential. When you think about Kansas City, you think about Kelsey. When you think about the New England Patriots and you think about Gronk, like they're talking about this tight end in Bowers as being a guy that you will look at as the core focus of your offensive scheme that everybody else gets to thrive off of. So if you're entering in offensive weapon territory, then I think everything needs to be on the table, but I don't have any problem with it. And I think that this is something that fans are going to probably fire off a few shots at us in the comments on this. And over the course of the summer, you're going to hear these kind of debates. A lot of segment says we have to go with quarterback, have to move to get him if that's what it takes, whatever it takes. That's not the only scenario that can play out here. And you need to be prepared for more than one. If the Giants don't trade up in the draft, well, guess what? You're going to have to take a different player. Like, if they're there at 6 and they can't trade back, they're going to have to draft somebody. So be prepared for it. Look at the other players and don't make it out that if not quarterback, it was a mistake. No, see the value and just understand you're trying to build a good football team. And sometimes it goes down the road of taking the best talent, filling needs, and building a strong roster.
I agree. And listen, it may seem like a hot take, but right now, the way that I think the Giants are thinking, I think it's more likely that they trade back than they trade up, just because like there are so many holes on this roster the Giants need to fill. And like if they moved back to 10 and you still have a chance to get a player that you like, one of the left tackles, an edge rusher, one of the right tackles that could be your right tackle, or an edge rusher, or Rome Odunze falls to you at 10. Like there's a whole host of ways that the Giants can still get an impact player, collect more draft assets, maybe
Yeah.
to even move back into the first round and get that quarterback that everybody wants. So like for me, I do think that there's a whole host of options for the Giants at 6. It feels like if the board fell with 3 quarterbacks and 2 wide receivers off the board, it kind of eliminates a lot of the options that the Giants would want. So you hope that a Joe Alt gets put in there, or you hope that
Yeah.
someone takes an edge rusher early that they fall in love with, just to be able to give the Giants more options. But yeah, I mean, Adam, you're right. I'm not huge on Brock Bowers. We've already tried making the tight end with Darren Waller your main focus, and it didn't really work out for a whole host of reasons.
We'll be talking about this off season too. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's like, do you want to pick up the $13 million option? Feels like you still have an option there with Waller to try to figure out that hole. I think the Giants
Maybe
have
move
other
on.
holes, but clearly that part is for another day.
Yes, and just as a reminder on Odunze, also he's 11th overall prospect on NFL Draft Post. So we're not talking about taking some seismic drop back here and picking the 20th ranked player. And if we think that there's a little bit of buzz around him, you get to the combine, starts to elevate it a little bit. Be interesting to see how he performs. This is a 4.3, 4.40, and a 4.19 pro level agility shuttle that he has there as well. Does a great job. Has the physical attributes that you want from a player like this. And just to your point, there's a couple guys ahead of him that are getting a little more buzz. And when you need and you think you have a player that's 6'3, 215 and can play on the outside, like this is the guy you want to kind of mold a player, I should say, that you want to add into the mix. That being the case, we're going to keep covering all these conversations and topics throughout the course of the offseason, but we also have playoff football that we want to get into here, and we'll do that right after we tell you about our friends over at Potential. Why? That is because it all comes down to giving yourself the well-being assessments, not maybe every day, maybe every week, maybe every month. And that's what Potential is. It's an online assessment tool, basically a survey that sets benchmarks and tracks your well-being and gives you coaching, ways to improve it, and also tracks your progress over time. And it's completely free for individuals. So you can check out Potential.com. That's Pientential. This is for everybody. It's for prospects. It's for coaches. It's for Brian Dable. Get over to Potential and just set some well-being benchmarks for yourself as you head into year number 3. The other thing that's happening right now is heading into the second round of the playoffs for the NFL. The Giants are not a part of it, Andy. Travesty such as it is. The Giants will not be partaking. We had our host battle. I thought we did an excellent job. Now I crushed it on a whole other level because we both hit 2 out of 3. So that's very good. I just happened to get my 3 and 2 point plays. You missed out on your 3-point play, the Steelers game, the Bills, the weather. It was all the mess.
Asterisks. Yeah. Asterisks on that one.
Yeah, totally. Asterisk. I'll put an asterisk on the Eagles because I couldn't pick 2 NFC East teams to lose. It was hard for me, but we now move into it where we're going to be talking about Houston Texans visiting the Baltimore Ravens, Green Bay Packers going to San Francisco, Tampa Bay heading to Detroit, and Kansas City going to Buffalo. Same as every other time that we've done this. A little coin flip action. Call it, Andy.
Tails never fails, baby.
Tails never fails. It is heads, which means that I will have the choice of taking this first game or sending it over to you. How bold do I want to be, Andy? I'm going to go ahead and say I'll play this one out. Oh, gosh. I'm going to start with the Houston game. I'm going to give you the Green Bay Packers one to decide. Houston is going to Baltimore plus 9.5, over under at 43.5 right now. The problem here is has the Cinderella story come to an end for a rookie QB and a young head coach and the journey that they've been on? Baltimore feels like a team that is the number 1 seed. And just kind of, well, yeah, ho-hum, just happened to be the number 1 seed, right? Lamar Jackson has been a long debated, is he a good QB? Is he a great QB? Is he an MVP QB? And then guess what? Funny thing happens. He's the number 1 seed. The question really just becomes, can Houston keep this close? Can they keep it within not quite a 2-score game? I have a really hard time picking this one, honestly, because there's a part of me that thinks this could go blowout and Houston kind of falls off the rails here at the end, or that they battle and they keep it close. I'm going to go with the Cinderella story ends. Baltimore minus 9.5 at home. I think that Houston's been a great story, but it's time for them to now get to the offseason, add the next set of pieces, and be a really dangerous team in the years to come. You then, Andy. Oh, I have to make it my that's right. I have to pick a play here. Sorry. 3 and 2 points. I'm gonna go 2-point play on this because the other game that I'll be picking will be the Detroit Lions. So I feel a little bit good about that. Okay, Andy. That means that your first game up is going to give you Green Bay Packers going to San Francisco. Also a plus 9.5 for Green Bay. Over under at 50.5 in this game. Does Jordan Love have the juice?
You know what's funny? Like everything you mentioned about like uh heavy favorites off of rest against a young first year starting quarterback going on the road, winning a
It all
game.
applies.
Does it end? There's questions around the heavy favorite 1 seed quarterback and whether he
Mm-hmm.
can get it done, whether he's going to do it. Like I thought you were talking about the San Francisco 49ers against the Green Bay Packers when you were giving your analysis
That's right.
on this whole thing. And what's interesting, Adam, is 66% of the betting money is going in on the Houston Texans. 60% of the betting money is going in on the Green Bay Packers against San Francisco. So people are leaning maybe a little bit of recency bias. They're
Yeah.
like,
For the
I just saw
underdog.
those teams win those playoff games. Like they're hot. Like who knows what's going to happen. I kind of went back and forth on this too because Jordan Love has looked great. I'm going to take San Francisco laying the 9.5. I think Brock Purdy has the ability to get the ball in the hands of his weapons, like Debo Samuel,
Yep.
Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, Kittle. There's so many weapons, and it's not like the Green Bay Packer defense is all world. I think the Packers, are going to give up some points. If really, to me, I know that, and this is usually how the games go, but like the first team to score 7 points and the other team is like, like we got to come back, it plays into each other's hands. I
Yep.
think that it's going to be a tougher time for the Packers to come back against that San Francisco defense. Give me San Francisco in a 13, 14-point game
Ooh.
to win at home.
I gotta say, if we flip this, I would go quote Homer on my QB guy that I've been a fan of all year, and I would take Jordan Love and the Packers to cover with that 9.5 point spread. Would you lay the points for Baltimore?
I would, because everything says CJ Stroud, like he looked amazing. And then it's like, I fast forward, and what makes you look the most foolish after the game? It's like, why did I bet on the Houston Texans on the
Right,
road with a
right.
rookie quarterback against the number one defense in the NFL in 20-degree weather? Like, I always fast forward and think like, what makes you look the most foolish? That to me seems like the scenario that is the most foolish.
So that's what makes it interesting when we get to my second game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to Detroit. It's plus 6.5 for Tampa Bay. It's a 48.5 over under here in this game. And you talk about QBs. Now, this is interesting because these are both top QB players under center here. In the case of Jared Goff, kind of gets a little, shakes off some of that pain of history past, getting sent by the Rams to Detroit for Matthew Stafford. You come out, you look good. They trust you in some key spots here to make big plays in that game and get the win. But conversely, I mean, listen, we don't know if Baker Mayfield is a Hall of Famer or not, but what we can tell you is he did more than enough to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. The one thing that I think to me feels different about this game than the Eagles, who are having really running out the string here, right? Going the wrong direction. Tackling. Tackling matters. There were so many missed tackles by Philadelphia that to me set up so many opportunities for Tampa Bay to be successful. Their offense for Eagles was also going off the rails there. There were drop passes. Mike Evans dropped right in the bucket. That wasn't about tackling. Like there's a world where Tampa Bay could have put up more points if they wanted to. But this does feel like, at least right now for this year, that Detroit is hitting all the right cylinders. They have the running game in place. They have the wide receiver weapons. I would take Amon-Ra St. Brown overall right now than any wide receiver currently on Tampa Bay, and there's a lot of talented ones there.
Wow.
Laporta came back last week healthy, so they have everybody. Williams in the running game. There's a lot of boxes that get checked for me. It feels like Dan Campbell has Detroit really rolling. I'm going to take Detroit at home. I'm going to lay the 6.5. It's a clean environment indoors. Fun little fact here. I don't know if you saw when the interviewer asked, how are you going to prepare? How are you going to prepare for the weather? It's going to be low temperatures. What, if anything, are you doing? And you just had him go, you had the coach go, we play indoors, right?
Yeah,
No,
we're
I
playing
haven't done
indoors.
anything.
Adam, listen, I love that pick.
Yeah.
Listen, the Eagles defense, the Eagles secondary, like there are players missing tackles, running, taking
Yeah.
bad angles. Like they just did not want to be there.
Nobody is
Detroit's
checked out
defense,
for Dan Campbell, right? Like that, no
oh,
one is checking out on Dan Campbell as a head
no,
coach.
the Detroit defense against the run is unbelievable. They're going to make Baker Mayfield pass it. Like that dome is going to be very, very loud. I love
Yeah.
the pick. It feels like this one is setting up for a big Detroit win. So I really like that one.
That leaves you, Kansas City. First road game in the playoffs for Patrick Mahomes, getting 2.5 points, getting an over under at 45.5. So that makes it almost, that's the second lowest over under here of the weekend. Where do you stand? This is the big test. It's Josh Allen, it's the Bills, it's Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a classic clash.
So I went with the Steelers getting 10 points against the Bills.
There you go.
That did not work out very
That's right.
well. I mean, thank you for being kind enough to put an asterisk when they moved the game and 36 inches of snow. They, I thought it was going to be a hodgepodge mess.
Sure.
Thank you for allowing me the asterisk. In this game, am
Yes.
I going to make the same mistake and bet
No.
against the Buffalo Bills?
Yes, you are.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to make this
I
mistake
know.
because
Oh my God, he's a fool.
I cannot kick the Patrick Mahomes bug that I have. Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs getting points. And people are like, it's on the road in cold weather. Like, does it matter? Does it actually matter where Mahomes plays, whether it's like against the Monstars, whether it's in Hawaii, whether it's in Kansas City? To me, it doesn't matter. I know that the Chiefs have not looked good, but defense travels. They have a good run game, and Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to take the points and the Chiefs. There's no way that I could find myself betting on the Bills when I feel like they left. It was a 7-point game in the fourth quarter against the Steelers and Mason Rudolph. What's it going to look like with Mahomes? I'll take the points and Patrick.
Listen, it is interesting. So plus 2.5 there for you. That game script, the weather, it obviously matters. I think the biggest factor, you mentioned it, is the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Like that unit is strong. That unit is good. What it comes down to is Travis Kelce done? Does this guy have bricks for hands now? Rice has been very productive for them. It does come down to, can Patrick Mahomes, to me, will them? I just love the fact that we're getting another one of these meetings, right, between these two teams, between these two quarterbacks. So you're taking the Chiefs plus 2.5. Did you tell me? Is that your 3-point play?
It's going to be my 3-point play. If it's going to be a
3-point
coin
play.
flip,
Wow.
I'm going to put 3 points on Mahomes. That's the way I look at it.
Absolutely love it. He's also taking the 49ers, laying the 9.5 points, I should say. I'm going to throw out a lot of numbers there.
No,
Laying the
laying
2.5
with the Niners sounds good, Adam. I'll take
I'll
that.
take,
Them just to win by a field goal.
I'll take the points if I can get them. That'll be the deal here. I come in at 5 points. Andy comes in at 3 points, blowing his, again, I can't tell you enough, blowing his 3-point play with the Steelers getting 10. We'll see how it plays out. We'll update, obviously, what goes on for the New York Football Giants over on YouTube at One Giant Podcast, over on Twitter at One Giant Podcast, at AndyMac214, at Adam Armbrecht, and wherever you get your podcast needs fulfilled. It is now the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Hey, that's exciting. Try to figure out a different name. Again, still have a problem with the Super Wild Card Weekend. We move our way along, though, in the postseason for the NFL. And we, of course, will be covering you here all offseason long for Big Blue. Until next time, though, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.